Hello and welcome to the Sidekick Stories podcast, encouraging conversations about mental health. Today I'm speaking to Shilpa Panchmatia. Shilpa is a serial entrepreneur and business growth coach. Having tasted the height of the entrepreneurial journey, the thirst, the quest for change, and the lows then of the entrepreneurial burnout, Shilpa is no stranger to the importance of a balanced life. Shilpa, hello.
Hello, thank you very much for having me, and so happy to share my journey and story with you.
Thank you so much thank you so much for your time, for being with us today. And we're really looking forward to have an open, honest conversation about your mental health journey. We're going to talk about particularly entrepreneurial burnout to get some insights into the tools and techniques that helped you along your way. I can imagine it was very, very difficult indeed. And by discussing your journey, we hope to share and normalize conversations about mental health, as often people are not alone in the experiences. And in the world of entrepreneurship, there's a lot of burnout. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, sounds great, and something I think we need to have more awareness around. It's a very fine line when you're an entrepreneur. The quest for success, the quest for great figures. You when you're starting out, you've got a product, a journey, and it's very exciting, and you spend so many hours working and working and working. But to actually understand that that's not the best way for us as human beings, and it's a good thing to learn, I think. And I wish I'd had some support in my days of being an entrepreneur so many years ago. I just carried on working and working.
And it does seem, and I wonder if there's a question maybe we talk about as we go through, that there seems to be some parallels between, and I wonder, can you be an entrepreneur and have a balanced life?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I was under the impression that perhaps that's not the case, but yeah, I would love to hear how that could be achieved.
Well, being an entrepreneur is just very similar to having a job, and it's about you managing your time, your structure, your days, and I guess your productivity. I think the biggest challenge to contain is this need for consistent, complete control and success. You can never stop. There's always another social media post to do. There's another report to write, depending on where you are in your journey as being an entrepreneur. Whether you have staff looking after things for you, have you created structures and systems and processes that enable you to step back? Do you know how much work you need to do to be successful? And I think it's also an internal position that when you know that you've reached a certain level of income, success, you stop then. And you do want to grow, but you do qualitative, quantified, progressive growth. I think that's when it becomes a bit different.
So tell us from your perspective, like you've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. Tell us about that journey that led to burnout.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I've been always been driven. I don't know why. I come from an entrepreneurial family. I was selling lemonade at age 5. I was reading the Financial Times at age 12. It was always something that I needed to do. When I worked in the corporate world, I had a marketing career. It was very different. It was work. You did your work, and in those days, you didn't have computers. You did a job. You had paperwork to do. You often, had a couple of hours to do a week extra, but that was about it. Your evenings were yours. You'd finish work at 5 o'clock, 5:30. Your evenings were yours.
Yeah.
I think when you go into business, you're starting something. There's a tremendous learning journey for you. You're tasked with many, many different types of work, accounts, productivity, to manage, to enable you to run that business. So you've got a journey to climb in first learning, and then you've actually got to do the work. And if you're not careful in managing your workflows and being very systematic in doing the work, you can work many, many hours. And I think the advent of the laptop made that very prominent to people, because I remember my early days of having an office and going there, and once the office was closed, you came home, you didn't work.
Yeah, which was a perfect separation, I assume.
Yes. And I see it certainly more in pandemic times, because people are at home. When we here in London, we've been at home now coming up to a year, most of us working from home. I certainly have. And it's blended. We don't have many opportunities to use the outdoors in winter times. And The time is just blended in, that it's all one blur, and we're working internationally, we're working globally. I'm certainly taking calls first thing in the morning. I'm going to be appearing on a live this evening at 10 o'clock, and it's total encroachment. It is, isn't it? It's total encroachment of a person's time. So you really got to be careful in sectioning that out and being very careful in what you do. My passion for business, my quest for success, whatever it meant, a new product, a new business, a new area, a new thought process, always meant that I was on, always going. I was also very young. I was burning at both ends, partying hard, working hard. And I think it came to a stage where I completely lost all control of it, and I would feel tired. I would feel demotivated. I would have shakes, and then when I would take these to the doctor would say, well, there's nothing wrong with you, your bloods are fine. Listen, I could still continue working. So it wasn't, but this burnout doesn't just happen one day, it creeps up on you. And it's interesting that they didn't actually diagnose it as a condition until 2019, when the World Health Organization said this is actually real. And until then, doctors and medical professionals would say there's nothing wrong with you. They said I had a vitamin D deficiency and gave me vitamin D to take. There is a mental health journey here, because again, you're not being kind to yourself, you're not being compassionate to yourself, and you're not treating yourself well if you're constantly looking to be better and constantly striving. And I think that's where we can learn to manage our success path, and where we can learn to manage our expectations of life and business.
So do you think it seems that there's a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of, there's all of this idea of founder syndrome, or founders in general, who a lot of people who are coming out of university now, a lot of them want to go on and straight to be entrepreneurs, which is a fantastic thing. But at the same time, it seems like, do you think at that age, people have the tools that they're required to cope with that entrepreneurial journey? And if they don't, would you say that actually, as when someone starts that entrepreneurial journey so young, actually having someone or having some sort of support in the background or even in the foreground to help you manage and grow and develop is actually something that's really crucial?
I think it's a massive opportunity and a massive advantage to have that. You can, however, do it on your own if you wanted to. It's always good to have advisors, mentors, specialists, experts, and even just community support. When you're an entrepreneur, you don't have that support around you that you perhaps would have if you're taking on a job when you're a fresher or you're a management training scheme. You've got people to shadow. You've got little community groups, and you're taught the roles and the routes very quickly. As an entrepreneur, you don't have that, and you can learn that. We're very blessed to have so many systems and membership groups and books and gurus that teach us. But yes, I'm a big advocate of simplicity and ensuring that you very, very clearly understand what the risks are of being an entrepreneur, because one of the biggest risks is failure. We know what impact that has on our mental health if we haven't coded it properly. Failure, I think, should be celebrated, by the way. I think everyone will fail. That's a given. But when you fail, it's almost a rite of passage. Wherever you are in your life, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're not, it's absolutely a rite of passage.
And in some respects, failure it's not finite. It's not failure and then everything ends. It is, and it seems to me that word in particular, when you fail, it feels finite. I fail, therefore that is the end of whatever I've just been doing. I failed. But actually it's not, is it? There seems to be something, if you can really approach it in a much more kind of dynamic way, that failure doesn't need to mean the end, the total end of whatever you've been doing. It is just a small stumble which you will recover from, grow stronger, and be able to move on from.
Even if it's a bigger struggle, a bigger stumble, because you're so right that there is so much learning in that failure. And that is exactly how we progress in life, how we are successful through that learning. And there's an old saying, I think Tony Robbins started it, and he said, there's no such thing as failure. It's only just feedback. And he talks a lot about that continuous loop. Keep failing, keep feeding it back. Keep failing, keep feeding it back. And wasn't it Edison that said, I haven't failed. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work. I love that.
Brilliant.
And I think the keys in failure are accept it. Because when we give ourselves permission to fail, we actually give ourselves permission to excel. So expect to fail. We, as a society, don't generally accept it. We don't think it's going to happen, and then when it does, oh, I'm so sorry you failed.
Yeah.
Maybe we need a reframe. Oh my God, you failed. You're closer to whatever you want to do.
Yeah. And how do you, for me, there's maybe a slight paradox in, I agree with everything you're saying, but there's two concepts. There's this idea of accepting that failure, which I do agree with. Then there's the other one of striving towards your success. How can those be reconciled? Because, and the other kind of maybe, wise work, maybe kind of insight from a kind of a seasoned entrepreneur is, when do you know that what you're working on, it's failed enough times for you to go, okay, I might need to pivot, or I might need to change track a bit?
Yeah, that's a totally different thought process altogether. And that is more a business positioning, market positioning, business case, as opposed to a personal entrepreneur leader case.
Good point.
I think when you have a business proposition, it's important to make sure your market knows that you want it. And we're very lucky in that we have instant gratification these days, in instant feedback as to whether a product's going to work or it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Many years ago, you had to take a product to market, as product or service to market. You needed to test it the hard way of actually building a business and putting it out there. Today, you've got this marvelous thing called the internet. You could have an Etsy shop put up, you could have a services page put up, and you could be out on social media and sharing with people in a matter of hours. And you've got absolutely fast feedback as to whether this is something people want to buy or not. And then in a very short period of time, you've market tested it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So bringing it back to then more the personal, that kind of burnout journey, when you did, like you said, when you did suffer from burnout, what did it feel like? You said there was this kind of fatigue, this tiredness, and are there recognizable symptoms that maybe people perhaps listening might not realize they're burnt out?
I think it's very different for a lot of people. Bringing it personally to me, there was certainly this consistent feeling of fatigue. You wake up tired. I've slept 10 hours. Why am I still tired? And it's consistent. I think there's irritability. I think you start getting gastric disorders, because remember, the mind and the body are all one. And I think that makes an impact on you. I think there's a psychological element of how you feel a little bit disjointed, and some of the joy has gone in your life. I know certainly for me, I felt anxious, irritable, and I'd fallen out of love with my business. I didn't recognize that because I'm still striving, I'm still succeeding, I'm still chasing clients, I'm still making my business better, I'm still feeding back to my teams and creating a culture that's going to make them work really well. So the signs can be quite obvious, and they can also be quite subtle. So I think we all have bad days, but if you start feeling increasingly overwhelmed, and I'm seeing a lot more of it in these days, then I think it's time to start heeding the signs of whatever it is that we're going through.
And do you think that, like you said, you felt that you fell out of love with your business? When you suffer that burnout, is it something that you can take a step back, heal, and then fall back in love with your business? Or is it always that a big change is needed?
Not necessarily. I think it's down to you to assess where you are. I'd been running my marketing agency for 10 years. And when I got burnout, it was kind of creeping up on me. But as I said, I didn't really get a medical diagnosis. I'd explored alternative therapies, and a couple of people had mentioned it to me that, maybe you've got some sort of adrenal fatigue, stroke, burnout. The signs of burnout are very similar to depression. So they get confused. And I was confused in my head because on one hand, I was having these physiological feelings and symptoms. But on the other hand, I was quite happy partying. I was going to the gym and doing double classes, and I was happy, and I felt good about my life.
Mm.
But it's difficult to compartmentalize life, and just because you feel good, but perhaps you had lost a little bit of passion in your business, or I'm a starter. I've started lots of businesses, and that's where I excel. And I'm always looking for the shiny penny. That's who I've been. So, and I hadn't done that. 10 years is a long time for me. And I was lucky. I'd been courting a trade sale. So what had happened when I actually realized I had to make a change was we were having friends around for dinner, and I was in the kitchen cooking, and I collapsed. And I lay there on the cold tiles, kitchen floor, and I couldn't move. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, yes, it was terrifying because, again, you've not had a diagnosis that you can hang your hat on. Yeah. And I thought, okay, something has to change. So I did make a radical change, and I exited my business, and I took some time off. I was able to spend some time at home. I actually had 3 months at home. I was so tired. And I did restorative yoga. I explored my emotions. I had trauma that I trapped up for many years, and it was great for me to release that trauma through various ways like journaling, doing some EFT therapy, which is the acupressure, emotional touch therapy. That really worked very well for me. Being out in nature, reconnecting with friends, just having time for me, something which is such a vital part of my life today. But it was a space because I was like how you've described. The typical entrepreneur wants to be successful, and it's almost a rite of passage to work very hard and work all the hours that God sends. So that was really interesting on how I made that shift and that change. And I almost did something different, and I started looking at who I was as a person, what my values were. And I come across a Japanese concept called Ikigai. Have you ever heard of it?
Yes, so at Sidekick we have something that is, I hadn't heard it before we started Sidekick, but that idea about Ikigai, balance, assessing your life in a holistic way is really interesting once you get your teeth into it.
Yeah, that really made a difference to my life because once I kind of heard of this concept, I thought, this is really exciting. Let me go and evaluate this. And remember, I'm at that junction in my life where I've had tremendous success. I've had this passion, this amazing life experiences. I've been to 139 different cities in the world. I've had a great time. And when I experienced Ikigai is a Japanese term which actually means, it's not exclusive to Japan, but it means a reason to jump out of bed in the morning. How can you find happiness in living? We're all alive, we all live, we all want this thing called happiness. How do you find this happiness? And it came about that it's the intersection, and it's a real small intersection, and that's that little place that you want to get to, where your values cross things that you'd like to do in life, things that you're good at. And this was the important thing for me as a business person, things that people will pay you to do. Yeah. And when you find those 4 things together, the cross section is where your Ikigai is. And if you find it, you find out what you're most passionate about, then you find the medium through which you can express that passion. And I read somewhere that it was actually a great example of someone like Mr. Steve Jobs. He found his passion. He found what he was really good at. He found what people wanted to pay him to do, and he did it. And he followed his bliss.
And do you think that the world has enough kind of differentiation of the variety of products that are out there for entrepreneurs to find their niche that aligns with their values, that aligns with their beliefs, that enables them to achieve that notion of Ikigai and still produce things that are valuable to other human beings, in terms of trade at the same time?
You've asked me a really specific question, and I've got a very specific answer, yes.
Yes.
But I don't think it's as simple as that.
No.
I think it's more a journey, more a process, more a way of being. So you and I probably seen the same diagram, that that visual where you've got four little circles, and in the middle is this Ikigai.
Yeah.
And so, we're all very logical people, and we sit there and we say, okay, well, this can be my circle here for what I want to do. This can be my circle here of, what people are going to pay me for. But I think it's more an organic, I think it's more a holistic process that we go towards. And it's possible that we're already doing the work that we love. We're already in a sector that we are valued. And it's really finding that flow and that expression of bliss. So this is an analytical explanation for it, but I think the process is a little bit different of how you get there. And I think joy and happiness are part of it. You know how some people, they find joy in everything they do, and some people, they just moan.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I seem to find that that's a mindset. Lockdown has taught me one thing: whatever you get a chance to laugh at, laugh. Because the happiness I get from laughing is amazing. And I find myself laughing at things that I'd never have dreamt I'd laugh at. But the energy of happiness gives you joy, and it's domino effect.
And finding that joy, I suppose, like you said, it's when you're looking at what you're doing or what you're spending your time doing in your day, not having that kind of a narrow mindset on maybe perhaps what you've currently got in front of you, or jobs that you've previously had. You could look a little bit more broadly. You could almost look back in, something that I tried, it was to work out when was I most happy in terms of my, in terms of what I was doing. And it was always at school. I was something about school. I was like, oh, something about school, which I really enjoyed. And when you broke it down, actually, there were some real kind of key components of school life, which I loved. And I kind of thought, okay, why don't I try and bring some of those components back into my adult life? Now I'm 35, approaching 36. School was a long time ago, but actually bringing those components back brings me that same joy that I had back then. And I think it's going back and really understanding what those things that really make you tick do, and also what have you not done in a while, what have you forgotten, what hobbies did you love and you haven't picked up in the last 10 years because of life got in the way. It seems like now, like taking the time for yourself to be able to re-pick up those hobbies or find and explore new ideas and things to do, actually enables you to achieve, like you said, that very small intersection, which is defined by the Japanese culture as Ikigai.
Yeah, you've said so many important things there. And the one thing that really stood out to me was find your joy. And that joy could be in something that you've never really thought about, but find it. And I don't know if you agree with me here, but I find that we've become so work obsessed and smartphone obsessed that we haven't really had time to have lives outside of work. And many of us don't see our children grow up. Many of us aren't outside in nature. I've been a trekker and a mountaineer for a few years now, and I love walking. And all of a sudden in pandemic, I'm seeing all these people walking. And I'm thinking, where have you been? And you've been stuck in front of a screen, or you've been busy on your smartphones with work. And I think it's time for a change, because there is so much joy in communication with people, community, nature, and all these little things that we don't think about actually give us that peace and fulfillment that we sometimes look for.
And I think that's a good point. It's the things that we almost take for granted. We don't realize it's become a level of kind of subconscious. It just happens. But actually, like you said, if you step away from that computer, you put your phone in your pocket, you turn it off, you leave it at home. And I think I've got a couple of friends who on Sundays just turn their phone off. And I
Brilliant.
tried it, and actually by the end of Sunday, I felt relatively disconnected, because there does seem to be some, and going back to burnout, there's some that kind of always on, you're always connected into whatever idea you're going. You're never giving your chance, your mind and your body to rest. Even when you sleep, it's the first thing you're thinking about. It's always processing. Enabling that level of disconnection is important. And I think exercise is a really good one for this, because, and especially, I find intensive exercise, and it's not about whatever exercise you're doing. It's, I can't worry about whatever I'm worrying about at work if I'm worrying about, can I get enough oxygen in my lungs? My primary focus is, I need to breathe. And it's amazing once you get to that point and it disconnects from those worries onto something which is a much more physical. I find that that is a very releasing feeling. You can almost feel those worries just kind of rise above you, almost like on a cloud, and you feel a little bit better, feel more relaxed, you feel at peace.
I'm a big fan of massive exercise. However, when you've been burnt out, or you're about to burn out, I don't recommend a vigorous
Yeah.
exercise and gentler things. I have a daily yoga practice. So every morning I wake up and the first thing I do is I get on the mat. And I have learned the ability to let go of issues, because there's a meditation element of it, or you've got an intention for the day.
Yeah.
And I think it's just so amazing. We've got so many different Eastern practices, Western practices, where we can be mindful, we can be appreciative of our life and our mind. So many of us, we don't take care of our minds. And, I've been guilty of that, which is now, after burnout, the switch is intense for me, that I will have a hard reset come 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock. I mean, some days I have to work later. I take up a late call, but then I'll have had a snooze in the day.
Yeah.
So it's learning to look after yourself and,
Yeah.
and have boundaries and make sure your diary is closed. And I love this idea of no phones on a Sunday, a digital detox. We're constantly on demand. There's always a social media channel to look on. There's always emails. There's always WhatsApps. There's always text messages. We're just inundated with communication. But yet, I feel that we don't really have true essence of communication, in that we don't sit and talk to people about things that matter.
And I think we've always got to be very mindful, is that those digital sources that we are using or connected into, they are designed for us to keep on coming back to, mainly for the information that we provide those companies for. But often I think when that notification comes up, it says, oh, I've got an email, oh, I've got a text. But actually, I can leave that email, I can leave that text. If someone really wanted me, they can call me.
Yeah.
But that psychological feeling of wanting to see, actually, it's nothing to do with that email or that text. It's to do with the way that these products are designed. And I think having that in mind enables you to go, okay, I've got an email, I choose not to look at it now. And I think you can start to, I suppose, be very intentional with the way that you're using the technology around you, because there's a lot of technology and it is designed to capture your attention. But you can make a choice of whether you actually want it to capture your attention. You can turn off your notifications. There's a lot of things you can do to actually create a sense of peace around you, despite there being a lot of digital, digital connectedness at all times. You can choose the importance of messages getting to you. And I think that's a really good thing to do, perhaps for our younger audience, just to really get a sense that you can step back and try and create some time for yourself, which is so important.
I think it's essential that we find a way of managing our mental health, and being always on, as we say, is one of those things. I sometimes feel that people are expected to always be on.
Yeah.
For example, my phone automatically goes off at 9 o'clock till 8 o'clock in the morning. And people may have sent me a message, and then I've got 3 messages. Have you seen my message? No, I haven't. So you're expected to have a return time because of this instant communication channels that we've now got.
Yeah.
So I think we need to align with ourselves that we don't always have to be on. We can turn notifications off. We can come back to people at a different time period. I think we also need to be respectful of people's space and allow them to have lives outside of technology. So whilst the smartphone has been an immense benefit to the world, I think it's also caused many problems. And then you've got people who are getting Slack messages from their boss at 12 o'clock at night because the boss is working, and they feel obligated to respond because they've seen it.
Yeah.
Or there is a communication tool, it's been noted that, well, this person's seen it, and you feel, well, I have to respond. I think you've got to sit down and work out within your own heart and soul as to what your way of operating is going to be, and make it okay with yourself.
And also, I think you say that dynamic between the boss and the employee, or the boss and the worker, that is a, you know, actually having a chat and having, you know, some setting those expectations, and actually from a worker's point of view, seeing their boss message late at night might be a very good explanation. They might have a young kid and say, do you know what, this is the only time I get some peaceful some work done. But also at the same time, the boss has to go, look, I don't expect you to respond. Like, this is just me when I can do the work, because I feel overwhelmed. Because that's the other thing, is that there's always, it goes both ways. You know, I'm feeling overwhelmed, therefore I'm trying to catch up, but I can't catch up because I've got a lot going on in my life. But you don't need to respond now. You turn it off. I don't even expect your response until the morning. And if you do, I'm probably going to talk to you about it, because I don't want you working on it all the time. So it comes both from the bottom up and from the top, if you're looking at some form of business hierarchy. And I think, I'm not sure what your view is, but there seems to be the generation above myself who there's a clash between, you know, especially in the city, in the kind of pyramidal structures of partnerships and those senior managers rising to partnerships. There seems to be a clash between a work-life balance and the old school way of looking at it, where you are constantly on, and that's the only way to do it. And that doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation, and I think there's many different levels. I'm probably in that generation above you, and I've seen firsthand the impact of that overwork and that constant. It changed the way that you worked, and the culture changed from being a 9 to 5, which is probably in my parents' generation, to one of excellence and striving and showing that you're committed, and promotion and performance related culture. And I think that certainly the millennials are more interested in seeing balance in their lives. They certainly have more ability, because there is a major emphasis on caring, well-being, pleasure. You've got digital cultures where you can do what you want as long as you perform. You know, play ping pong all day long if you want to. But just make sure you get your work done at a time that suits you. So I feel almost we're being more in harmony with our own rhythms, our own times, our own rhythms, I guess, that what works for us.
And it seems to be now, especially when we're hopefully going to come out of lockdown in a couple of months, but we've been in lockdown for a year. And I think I read some statistics that saying on average, people are working 30% more than they would normally. I mean, the argument is because there's not much else to do, or it's just because there's time there, and, you know, the pressures, the anxiety are mitigated through doing work. And that's a worry. That's a habit we're going to have to get out of when everything starts to open up again.
We definitely are, and I agree with you that we've got the workload there. Previously, we would have had things outside of our lives, but people are stuck at home and working. I think there's a pressure that we put on ourselves. You know, we have to learn to not put so much pressure on ourselves to perform so much. We can do the work as much as we can, and we must take time and care for ourselves. We must have recharge breaks. You know, I normally put them all into my diary: recharge break. Get out daily, exercise, be out, even if it's raining, get outside and have some fresh air. It's just absolutely vital. And do things that you enjoy. Create a passion project. You know, is it gardening? Is it growing your own herbs? Is it buying a classic car? Find something that's going to give you joy. Because in business, you can work, you know, 24/7, but there's going to come a time when you're going to wake up and say, I didn't have a life.
And it's that I always, talk to my friends about deathbed thinking. And I think if I get to my deathbed and I'm thinking I haven't enjoyed the life, because there's lots of choices in life, but there's one choice that you don't get, and that is to add more time. And you've got a finite amount of time. And if you're not, in my view, at least 50 or 60% of your life having, experiencing a level of joy, then that needs to change. And if you can make a change, and like you said, finding that passion project, work doesn't need to be your provider of joy. Work can be a provider for something else, a nice, comfortable life. But find your joy in whatever you're doing. And it doesn't matter what you do, reading, knitting, exercise, yoga practice. But I think the key thing is to find that joy, because joy won't find you.
Nicely said.
Well, Shilpa, thank you so much for your time. A fascinating conversation from someone who's experienced that. I really find it fascinating, the shift from that. You said your parents' generation, the 9 to 5, into something that was on an enormous technological shift. And it sounds like in some respects you were, in terms of burnout, a victim of that shift. And that really had an impact. So, well, I thank you so much for your wisdom and insight, and also sharing the tools and tips that have helped you along your way.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure and an honor.
And thank you to everyone listening. You can subscribe to us on most major podcast platforms, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Just search for Sidekick Community or Psychic Stories and we'll pop up. And please do give us a rating if you like the show. And do check out our free Sidekick app for iPhone and iPad. It's a collection of interactive exercises, tools, and tips to help you boost your mental well-being. And in particular, on this episode with Shilpa, we've spoken about burnout. Now, one of our partners, Jonify, have kindly allowed us to host their burnout assessment on our app. So you can actually go on our app and identify whether you may be burnt out or not. It's a very useful tool. I use it daily. Turns out I'm burnt out a lot of the time. So I do need to make a life change. So for the app, just go to our website, www.sidekick.org.uk, and click the download now button in the header to take you to the app. Shilpa, thank you so much again.
Thank you.